Oh.
Hello, Kenny. Episode 10.
Rabbi, episode 10, we made it. And what a special guest we have today. Legendary Jon Hajdu, the man himself in the flesh. Well, kind of, virtually at least. But Jon Hajdu, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
The Rebbe of California kosher wine.
I'm pretty sure that the only reason that Yisroel Bernath wanted to do this podcast was just for this purpose, just to sit down and get an hour of your time and pick your brain, because he's been talking about this nonstop.
You are not wrong.
Well, that's great. I think this should be our first podcast, but the next one, we should get you guys out here to California so we can, I mean, I got barrels we can open up and we can do all kinds of fun stuff. So
I think I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes booking my ticket. I'm ready to go.
Kenny, you book the ticket. I'm coming. I just have to finish a few weddings. I'm actually in the middle of a wedding right now. I just signed the ketubah with a couple, and the cocktail started in an hour. So I figured, why not spend this hour with the Rebbe?
Mazalta, that's amazing.
Jon, I am drinking this. I just got it, but I'm drinking the new Landsman, the Syrah.
Amazing.
And
excellent.
Tell me about it. You're telling me the story behind it, because I've heard it a little bit.
Yeah. So in 2020, we changed one of our vineyards, one of our fruit sources. So from, I think, 2012 till 2020, the Landsman Syrah was from Moavini Vineyard, which is in Bennett Valley, just east of Santa Rosa. And then during 2020, because of the smoke and the fires in Northern California, we couldn't get that Syrah. Actually, I ended up getting a little bit that was left on the vine for a Syrah port, which actually just released. But in 2020, we needed more fruit sources, so we went to the Central Coast, and we got two different Syrah vineyards. One of them, that's the Robert Ray Vineyard, and it's a very cool climate. That's our last fruit that comes in, so it's kind of a very northern Rhone style, a lot of savory notes, very low alcohol, compared to what we usually do in our Syrahs, and we really liked it, and we've kept that vineyard as our Landsman Syrah, and we'll see what happens for 2024. We might be changing vineyards again. We'll see. We might go back to Northern California, to Sonoma County, for the Landsman.
It's really delicious, and I think I read somewhere where you said that the first thing you really strive for in wine is balance and typicity. And I think it's like you nails it. This is perfect, I think. I mean, it's really great.
Thank you.
Landsman, for those who don't know, is the wine club from Covenant, where, as we did not even mention yet, Jon is the head winemaker. For how many years now?
Let's see. I can't remember when they officially gave me my winemaker title. I think when they first hired me in 2008. It was an associate winemaker position, and I think they changed it to winemaker probably in 2009 or 2010. But I actually worked for Covenant even before they hired me, because I worked for Herzog Wine Cellars from 2003 to through 2006. So I worked on every vintage of Covenant since it was started. So I came on board, I think it was the end of harvest, 2003, to Herzog, and Covenant was there, and Jeff and I clicked right away. We just, I had a small lot winemaking background after completing a harvest at a custom crush winery called Copan, and so there was maybe 10 or 12 different wineries there, all non-kosher producers. So I was everybody else was working 7 days a week. And then I remember them pulling me aside in the middle of harvest, and they're like, "So how many Jewish holidays are there that you can't work?" It's like 10 days. And then so after my 03 harvest, I was introduced to Peter Stern, and they gave me my first job working in a kosher winery, and which was great for me because I was keeping kosher at the time, so I couldn't actually, it's nice to be able to drink the wines that you're making. That's a good one. Yeah, it's a little hard to make, $100 Pinots and not be able to taste them. It's pretty frustrating. But I think philosophically, Jeff and I really we really connected as far as the kind of wines that we wanted to make.
So how did you get into winemaking? Give us the origin story.
So I spent, so my family's a Baal Tshuva family. So I didn't really start keeping strictly kosher till I was about 21. And wine was the last thing that I gave up, basically. And I went to SUNY Albany. I was a kind of pre-med archaeology major, but I really loved wine. I had done my senior year abroad. I was an exchange student, not in Europe or anything. I was in Brazil. But when I got to school at SUNY Albany, the dollar pitcher of beer scene with the frat guys was not my thing. So it was mostly like hanging out with my friends were all older. They were all like grad students, and we would go to wine bars, and I just tried different wines. And I grew up with wine in the house, not like fancy wines, we would have, but kosher wine. A lot of Israeli wines, sometimes Yarden. That was like the more expensive wines that my parents would have at home. But I started kind of exploring wines that I could barely afford, really. And I remember in 1998, I tasted a bottle of the Schaefer Hillside Select. All the wine shops were super excited. They had gotten some, and it was so cheap. It was like $36. Like now it'd probably be like $300 or something. And that, like, everybody has like a bottle or a wine that they taste, and it really changes their perspective. And I use the word perspective because it's like wine. I think when you start off tasting it, it's very two-dimensional, and then you have a wine, and all of a sudden there's just this depth of flavor, and it really changes it from like a two-dimensional perspective to like this three-dimensional perspective of taste, where it just really transports you. So after that, I called around. I tried to find some jobs in some wineries, and nobody would get back to me. There really wasn't a clear path to getting into wine in New York. And randomly, just through chance, I ended up in Australia. Not even for wine, just because that's where life took me. So I left SUNY Albany. I ended up in Australia, and when I was there, it was very easy to get into a wine program, which was at Swinburne University, had a 2-year viticulture program. So I started studying viticulture in Australia, doing some work in the Yarra Valley. It's a cool climate wine region in Victoria, in the Melbourne area. From there, I got an internship at this custom crush winery in Santa Rosa. And then from there, I was picked up by Herzog Wine Cellars. And that was it. That was the beginning for me. That was 21 years ago.
Wow.
I believe you were with the Weiss brothers, those original.
Oh, yeah. All right. So, oh gosh, man. I remember, I remember when Gabe came on board. I think it was probably 2005. When I first started with Herzog, they didn't have their own winery yet in 03. They were custom crushing. They were renting space. in another winery. Custom crushing is basically, when you're custom crushing is you're renting space in another winery. So, for example, Hajdu Wines, we basically custom crush at Covenant. So, Covenant's not it's not Hajdu Winery, but it houses Hajdu Wines here. So Hajdu Wines are made here. So Herzog did the same thing for a long time. Before they, when I was working with them, they were in Santa Maria at Central Coast Wine Services. It's a huge winery. It's massive. It's gigantic. Multiple wineries in that facility. We had an apartment, and it was like very cushy for me to go from making to working with everybody else to working in a kosher winery. So we went from like a 6-day work week to a 4-day work week. So it was, Monday through Thursday. And then the guys would go home. They'd spend Friday driving back down because we were in Santa Maria. They had an apartment for us. So the job came with an apartment. So every Shabbat I'd go down to LA and just kind of go from place to place, hang around different areas. And then Gabe came on board in 2005 after Herzog had built their winery. And then I think was it 05? Yeah, we made some Syrah together in 05. That was the first Shira.
Right, so, right. Which we had one other interview, and it was with them, and nice. they pulled that exact bottle out to show it to us.
Wow.
They'll have 2 of them, they said.
I think I don't have any myself, but my dad has one. He's got a nice wine cellar in Long Island. So one of these days we'll have to get together and crack open a bottle.
That would be a great room to be in. So, and then the Hajdu wines, when did they start? And I mean, I guess, why did you decide to, I guess a lot of winemakers like to do that, but that's not a simple thing. You have a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that.
So, well, when I first really, so let's see. So in 2006, I decided I really wanted to experience making wine in Israel. So I left Herzog Wine Cellars and I got a job with Carmel in Zichron Yaakov for 6 months. I worked with them, did the 06 harvest. It was during the 06 Lebanon War. So Zichron Yaakov's not that far north, but we still would get rockets down that way. So we'd have occasional sirens and stuff while we were working. But the nice thing about the Carmel Winery is that the wine cellar is the caves are underground, so you just go down into the wine cave when there's a rocket siren, which was great. It was kind of fun to go down there into the barrel room. So I was there for 6 months. I came back and then in 07. I'm, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was kind of working on some potential projects in Napa. None of them panned out. So I called a friend of mine in Santa Barbara. He had a winery down there. And I said, hey, can I come make some wine at your place? So I went to Santa Barbara for a month and made 3 barrels of wine. Made a Syrah and a Grenache. And then shortly after harvest, I got engaged. I got married. And, I told my wife, we're moving to Northern California. She's an artist, designer. She does all my labels, all the artwork. And she was working, she had an internship with Puppet Heap, which is kind of an offshoot of the Muppets. So she was working on those. And she was working as a designer for a clothing company. And that everybody's awful in Manhattan. I mean, to work with, I think in that industry in New York, they're not nice. I don't know what it is. It's just the culture there. New York. I was like, come to Northern California. No one will yell at you. It's so I dragged her out here, and when Covenant heard I was moving out here, they're like, we better hire this guy or he's going to be making wine for somebody else. So they hired me as their associate winemaker, and we moved their production up to Napa, actually. So we were renting space first at Raymond Wine Cellars. Yeah, that's how I got to Northern California. So I had like 3 barrels in 07 that I'd made. I bottled those probably sometime in 2008, or maybe it was 2009. And then for 08 and 09, I did like 1 barrel. And then in 2010, I expanded a bit.
I think I may have. Do I have those? I may have those. I was actually, as you were talking, I was looking up my cellar tracker to see what I have
So
from.
it's not under the Hajdu label. It's under the Brobdingnagian.
Right. And by the way, I was
That's
hoping
right.
to say that before me, because I was practicing for the last half hour of saying Brobdingnagian, which
Yeah.
explain how you came up with that name. I know.
So,
Yes, go ahead.
I really like, I mean, now I think I've kind of, in 2007, I wanted to make wines that were really big, really bold. There just really wasn't a lot of options in that kind of genre where you have like wines that are maybe they're 16 or 17% alcohol. It wasn't really about how much alcohol is in the wine. I actually find that to be like a really kind of boring topic, like where people talk about alcohol levels, or it's just like, it doesn't matter. The wines are big and they're concentrated. And I wanted to make some wines in that style. And they were huge. Like the Grenache was just this big, 17 something% alcohol. It was just really concentrated, really delicious, very rich. And people loved it. It was great. And the Syrah was very similar as well. And I was just trying to think of like what kind of like, really what name, what brand, and they were just these gigantic wines. So Brobdingnagian, I'm a big Gulliver's Travels fantasy genre reader. And so the label also is, my original label was an elephant on a unicycle. So it's kind of like gigantic animal, but balanced. And like a lot of my other labels subsequently were kind of they're kind of giant animals, like the ostrich for the Grenache, and a whale label and other things like that. But they're so they're kind of whimsical, so not too serious, but not completely unserious either. So I think it's like the idea for the Hajdu wines is that the wines are fun. And they're not, they're for everybody to enjoy and kind of explore.
You mentioned it, but first of all, really interesting idea behind the size of the giant and the balance, because I never thought about that aspect of the label. But I do want to mention again that your wife's labels are amazing, some of the coolest in the industry. I do follow her Instagram artwork. She's very talented, and you're lucky to have her.
I know, I'm very lucky.
They are such cool labels. And they stand out, but that's such an interesting idea, and especially based on what I said before about how I guess that is part of your winemaking style is balance. And
yeah, it's balance, but also ripeness and concentration, I think is so that's I think if you've got the appropriate level of ripeness and concentration, I feel like the balance comes. It's not necessarily the focus. It's something that you have to have. But yeah, primarily with Hajdu, I'm looking for concentration and intensity. And I think with Covenant, I think we're definitely more focused on balance and kind of the style and balance of the wine.
So when your wife makes a label, because everybody knows the Hajdu label, when your wife makes a label, do you like explain to her like, okay, big fruit, balance, or she just gets it? You don't have to say anything.
No, I can't say, I mean, you can't say anything at all. I just, she's a real artist. I mean, like I'll tell her, I'll tell her like kind of what I'm thinking. I'm like, I'll tell her a little bit about the wine. She actually has a great palate. She doesn't have a great tolerance, but she has an amazing palate. So I really trust her taste as well. So when I tell her that I'd like a new label, she, we'll talk a little bit about it. And she's like, okay, I have an idea. And then I don't know what that idea is. I have no idea. She'll sit down for like an hour.
A turtle in the library.
Oh, that one is the turtle in the library. Yeah. That was a fun one. Yeah. I don't even remember our discussion about that. I guess it was the Adventurers Guild's wines. So an exploration of wines. I can't remember what the thought process was there, but I mean, I love that label for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the giraffe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was
all large animals, right?
Yeah.
So, question for you. I did get to luckily see you at one of the kosher food and wine shows, or maybe both, or any of them. But I remember you showing me a new project you've been working on, which I think you call the mevushalizer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right. Yeah. So it's not really, I think I'm going to get a plug for this computer because I'm actually worried that my battery's going to run out here. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, guys.
Well, I'll talk to you.
I am starstruck. This is unbelievable.
I have so many questions. In fact, I just don't want to talk over you the whole time because I have a million things I want to ask him. It is amazing. Yeah. It is amazing. And we really, by the way, now that he's not here, we're absolutely taking him up on that offer. We're going out there.
We are going.
Can you imagine?
I can't. I'm looking behind him over there. They're all Covenant wines. There's no Hajdu wines there.
Those are, yeah. I'm pretty sure he's in the Covenant winery. But as they're even, you see on the wall there, those are the labels of the Covenant flagship wines.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was like the Chardonnay label there. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, but I see the Landsman, probably the one I'm drinking.
Yeah.
And we've got the full lineup.
Yeah, I see the brandy there.
There might be some Haidu lurking in the closets and stuff. And this is our tasting room at Covenant.
Which it moved up to, when did it move, the winery, to Berkeley?
We moved to Berkeley in 2014.
You really, I mean, I never thought about it that way, but the whole story of Covenant like mirrors your story in wine and your time also. It's hard to believe, even when you were saying about Herzog, like you think about these wineries as such established known wineries, because our world is much younger of kosher wine, but how, where yet old and new, but the regrowth and rebirth of it is so new. And you think they're so established, but you're talking one generation, really.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And I think I think the legacy is kind of something that we haven't spent too much time thinking about, like planting a vineyard and building something else up in wine country. Right now, we're in an urban winery, which is really cool, actually. So you can, it's 7 miles from my house,
right?
But I think eventually that's something that we're going to do. We'll have a vineyard, maybe a tasting room or a winery somewhere in wine country. We'll see. Don't know where yet.
That was one of my questions, but I don't want to forget about the
mevushalizer, right? So I think I can't remember exactly how it came about, but our distributor wanted to have a Mevushal Covenant cab, once basically we knew I think they've been asking for a long time, but finally Jeff was like, okay, we're going to try this out. We're going to try it out. So I thought, first I talked to my friend. I had an idea of what would work, how to build one. So I built one myself from basically a bunch of like spare parts and other stuff. It's a heat exchanger essentially, right? So it's got a boiler, which I use like a steel drum for, some stainless steel tubing, and it, basically it's a very small flash pasteurizer. So I've got plenty of cooling. I basically two drums, one for cooling, one for heating, and the steel tube that I ran through the machine, and then was able to just control the flow rate so that I could get the wine to go up to Mevushal temperatures and then cool it down quickly with I have like, we have ice cold glycol, chiller. So it's very easy to cool things down. Heating things up is the tricky part. So you need a really good heat source to get to those high temperatures. But I was able to kind of rig something up that worked, just like high voltage circulation heaters, essentially. And I was able to get it to work, with a flow rate, maybe 3/4 of a gallon per minute. So it does a little less than 1 barrel per hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
The kind of revolutionary aspect of this is the size, right? Is that right? That you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's just that it's very small. You can buy small flash pasteurizers. I've never seen anybody using one. But I had this concept. I'm like, I think this will work, but I'm going to talk to my friend, Levi Fried. If you guys ever want to talk to a brewer.
Right, from Long Beach.
Yeah. So that's all they do. I mean, like, that's not all they do, but like they do that all day. They're like heating stuff up, cooling it back down. Like that's,
Right.
so when it comes to that kind of thing, those are the guys to talk to. So he gave me a couple different ideas on how to kind of improve my design. So I built that first one, and it worked, but by the end, like my circulation heaters, one of them had partially exploded. I was able to kind of limp through and like kind of just finish my thing, and the drums were also like, the one for the glycol wasn't made for high pressure, and it's like 24 psi pressure, so that drum was about to like burst. So I rebuilt it for another batch that we did recently, and now I think I probably want to rebuild it one more time to make one that we can use for probably all the Mevushal wines that we make. So we would use it for the tribe, and also for for our smaller lots as well, if we decide to make them. And what I noticed with the wines that go through the process, so for the tribe wines, they're flashed before fermentation. So it actually heats up the grapes and everything, the must. And for the red wines, for these wines we just did, those are basically finished wines that were running through a flash pasteurizer. What we noticed was, in the short term, at least, like right afterwards, they're a little bit better. I think they kind of, it's almost like your wines are decanted. I think there's certainly some kind of oxidative effect that happens, so that it's almost like they're aged a little bit more. They're still very young wines, so they're very fresh, but you just have kind of better aromatics and a little bit more integration of flavor, like the oak and the other flavors are just kind of more well integrated, what you would expect in a wine that's been aging a little bit longer. So I think the only question mark is how they're going to age. I think I think what I would expect, I mean, they may or may not age well, but I think the wines that Mevushal wines in general, I think should be drunk earlier, is my opinion. But we'll see. Maybe that'll change.
I always thought that flash pasteurized meant just a few minutes. I didn't realize that it takes that long to pasteurize the wine.
actually less than a minute, right? So the wine is flowing through this tube and it goes into the hot one, and it takes just a few seconds for it to heat up to 190 degrees. And then from there, it goes into the cooling. So in less than a minute, you go up to a very high temperature and then back down to 50 degrees.
It's kind of like one of those tankless water heaters.
Exactly. It's exactly like that. Yeah. So it's just a heat exchanger essentially, which is what those tankless water heaters are. You're just so there's water running through these plates. Can you hear that beeping sound? My emails are making these beeping noises.
I'm not hearing that.
Do you think it really does affect the wine, Mevushal? Because it's a big question in general.
So immediately you see a change in the flavor. Now, I'm not saying it's a qualitative change necessarily, right? So you don't see any qualitative difference. Maybe, I mean, from my experience so far, I've seen, and I've run a few wines through, and actually we used to do this at, when I worked at Herzog, we started doing this M series. We had done for a little while. I don't think they do it anymore, but they had like they had these non-mevushal wines that we used to make. We had a Central Coast Syrah and a few other of the reserve wines. They were non-mevushal. And then they wanted to make some that were mevushal, and they called it M series. So we had wines and like pretty close to bottling, we would flash them, right? We would take part of it, put it through the flash. And initially, what I noticed was more aromatics, a slight improvement in the wine quality. And then and the only real issue I think you have is when the wines sit for a long time after that, maybe they start to lose some of those flavors, some of those aromatics.
Well,
from
what you're saying, it sounds like, yeah.
I was going to say Covenant, as we spoke about last time, they're using the diam cork. So was that thought about in terms of the mevushal process, or not involved at all, and just a...
So we were using diam for a while. Now we're using Gano it's the same type of product. It's called a technical cork. So it's like 40% plastic microsphere and 40% actual granulated flour cork. They grind the cork into flour, and then there's like some glue that holds everything together. They're just great. They're just, and the main reason we use them is corked bottles, so no cork taint. So they're completely TCA free. That's a fascinating.
Well, that was our podcast last week. I'll forward it.
Really?
I'll forward it so you can hear what you already know.
Well, I got to tell you, I remember maybe this is one of the last times we used natural cork, but from your suppliers, you can set up a cork tasting trial, right? So if you're going to buy 10,000 corks or whatever it is, maybe it's only 5,000 corks. A lot of the suppliers will let you go and pick out which bushel of corks that your cork is coming from. And they can set up a trial for you where they have, let's say, 100 different corks. 10 of them are from different bushels. Each bushel's like 10,000, right? So they'll take 10 corks from a 10,000 cork batch, and they'll infuse it in some white wine. And then you can go through and you can actually smell each of those samples, right? So I did this trial, 100 corks, 100 different corks. I did it blind with Jeff. So we went in, we went through, smelled 100 different wine samples. And then we took notes on each one ourselves, and then we compared them at the end, and they were like exact. There was like a lot of cork taint. Some of it kind of mild, some of it more intense. But I've seen estimates where they're like, oh, it's only 1%, and then some people it's like more like 5%, right? That's a lot. That's a lot of, like, and still we opened up, I open up bottles now. I'll open up a double Magnum. I've had it, I mean, maybe once or twice. A double Magnum, those corks are big, fat, thick corks. Those corks are like $10 each. That's like more than 10 times the cost of a regular cork. I've had corked double Magnums. It's terrible. I mean, actually, and I probably still will have those because I don't think they make a technical cork that's for those large formats. They might. I haven't seen one, but so I still use natural corks for those. But there's just no cork bottles anymore. And I've opened up some of these old bottles that have DM. Those corks are fine. They're solid. I feel like they're more reliable than the natural cork. So yeah,
it'll be interesting to see. I wanted to ask you, you guys make a lot of zin. You make your own zin. Covenant makes zin. There's so few zins available in the kosher world. Why do you think that is? If you're making it,
so my experience making zin is pretty easy. It's a pretty easy varietal to work with. I think selling Zinfandel can be, I don't think it's tricky. I just think people have intense opinions on Zinfandel. And most people either love it. Actually, I wouldn't say most people. A lot of people love it, and a lot of people really don't like it. So it just depends on the person. Some people that's the only wine they want.
mantra of the wine world.
Yeah, I mean, and they're really good. We have our Mensch Zinfandel, which is delicious. It's actually, it makes a great $22 red. I don't know that I could make a better $22 red from anything else that we have here. At least in California, I don't know if I could, where it makes sense to do that. But I like to make those big, kind of bold Zinfandels. That's kind of like I think that's where what I find that is really fun about Zinfandel is you can do these big, kind of super jammy, ripe kind of wines, and that's kind of where I like to go with the Zinfandel.
And talk about the besamim. How do you come about?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's an interesting thing because I tend to love it every time, but I know it's always a totally different blend. And
the besamim has been constantly changing. I think now that I've expanded production, I think it's kind of going to coalesce into a more specific kind of style, and that's going to be this kind of American heritage kind of style. So they have, I've seen some people call it mixed blacks, or they're black grapes. So Zinfandel is a black grape, like Mourvedre, Carignan. So these are varietals where they have a lot of old vines because they used to, the Italian farmers that moved here that were growing grapes, a lot of them planted Zinfandel, a lot of Carignan, and some other interesting varietals too. I've got some in barrel, actually, some Alicante, and then some of these old vines still exist. So they're planted in the 1800s, and they just make really big, fruity, delicious wines. So I think that's probably where the besamim is going to end up. Is going to be something kind of like that. So it's kind of like a Zinfandel blend. Maybe that's where we'll end up, or maybe we'll just go, Grenache and Syrah and Petit Syrah and go that route. We might do that as well. I don't know. We'll see. It just depends. It depends on what I have in barrel, and what I have more of, and what's getting bottled, and so it is. I think I called it a ragtag bunch of misfits. That's it's just like whatever doesn't have a spot goes into the Basami.
So there is no method to the madness.
There isn't, but it kind of ends up being a similar style anyway. It's chaos. It's it's a child of chaos. So, which I like.
Is there a GSM coming?
So I did one, was it 2019? Did a GSM.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I might have another GSM coming really soon.
It's due. I have none left. I'm just saying.
All right. Okay. I've got all the components I have. So yeah, maybe we'll do a 23.
Your GSM is my favorite GSM.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. The Mourvedre is really good here. So I get Mourvedre from Contra Costa. So it's old vine, 130-year-old vines. And it is dark and fruity, which is kind of hard to find actually for a Mourvedre. Some people actually, I've spoken with some people, they're like, oh, it's probably not really Mourvedre. It's probably something else that they planted in the 1800s, like Mataro or one of these other varietals. I don't know. I haven't had it like taken it to a lab to get tested, but could be something different. I don't know.
It makes good wine.
Do you have any other special plans you want to announce? Anything interesting coming?
Yeah. Let's see. There's a few interesting things coming. I'm gonna bottle an old vine Alicante Boucher. That's gonna be fun. Tempranillo. I've got one of those coming. What else? The
Alicante. I read recently about the Alicante Boucher. That's, what do they call that? Teinturier or whatever. It's like a red fleshed grape, right?
Yeah. So it's cool. They're like the and I used to see it when I would work with like old vine Zinfandel. They would the old farmers, they would interplant Alicante with the Zinfandel. They'd put like a few vines in here or there to add color, right? So it get picked with the Zin. And it adds a lot of color because usually when you're making a wine or wine grapes, they have, there's no color on the inside. It's all in the skin of the grape. But with Alicante, it has color on the inside too. So if you take the grapes and just squish them, like just red juice comes right out of them. So they have really great color. Herzog actually, I don't know if
they used to. They definitely, yeah. I haven't seen it in a long time. That was I think, a wine stock under that label, the Alicante.
Yeah, they might have bought one, but they used to use it for blending too. But I don't know if they still get any Alicante, but it's an interesting varietal.
Is that getting harder to find? Isn't there less and less of that nowadays, or am I totally wrong?
Yeah, no, there's definitely not a lot of it around. I mean, it's not considered like it's not really considered a quality grape for winemaking. It's usually considered like a blender for color or something like that, but you can make good wines and they're interesting.
I had read that about that Alicante, that it was planted really because of Prohibition, because they were able to ship it across to the East Coast, and because they could get like 3 squeezes out of it, 3 presses out of it, so they could get more bang for their buck with it, because it's so red and so like deep.
Yeah, that I could definitely see that being a thing that they would do for sure. What else is I'm going to be doing a reserve series of wines so that'll be coming out soon. So I've got they'll be probably labeled proprietary red, just because I try not to label anything Cabernet under the Haidu brand, just to avoid any overlap. But they're going to be 100% Cabernet. I've got some old vintages that I'm going to release. So I've got some 2014, some 2016s, and some 2020, some 2021. So if you, they're going to be, you know, there are not a lot of them, but it'll be fun. And Ellie did a new label for that too, so it'll be really cool.
That is cool.
Which 14s? Any grapes specifically?
Cabernet. Yep, it's all Cabernet. Yep.
By the way, it should be mentioned that Jon's wines are at hajdewines.com, Hajdu. I don't know how many times do you hear your name mispronounced?
I'd say most people pronounce it Hajdu, but it is actually Haidu.
Yes.
Haidu is the and if you're in Hungary, it would be Haidu. Would be but all the American Haidus pronounce it Haidu. Yeah.
But your wines and your wine club, which I've been in for some time, and which is why I have some of those old prop reds. Which what's your? I think I'm just looking through my cellar tracker, and I have I think I have a 12 and a 13 proprietary red. What is your? When am I opening them?
Gosh, I haven't had the 12. I mean, the 13 I've had recently is really excellent. 12 I haven't had in a long time. But I'd say they're probably really in their prime now. And I've got some 11 also. I've got a few bottles of that around. But they're definitely, they're drinking great right now. They've got like, you know, they still have some fruit left. It's, you know, but it's definitely turning more into the, like those, you know, kind of forest floor, cedar kind of notes, and like getting those old wines. Yeah.
Well, it's going to have, I need someone special, but it is my anniversary coming up next week. So that may be the perfect opportunity.
Happy anniversary. What else? Yeah, I mean, I'd like
speak for a second about the vermouth.
Oh, the vermouth. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I love the vermouth project. It's so much fun. And I'd been working on a recipe for a while, and then I saw on, I've been like doing some research and trying to find anybody making a good American one. And the only people I found that were really doing something special was, it's called Mom and Pop. So they were doing vermouth, which is citrus focused. So it's actually more of a vin d'orange than vermouth. So vin d'orange is it's a aromatized wine. They basically cut up Seville oranges and they infuse the wine with that and other things. So I decided to use that as kind of the basis for a vermouth blend. So I'm just making a new batch now, actually, because I'm almost out of my last one. So for this one, it's mostly Seville orange, but there's also some etrog and some Buddha's hand, which is another citrus, which is amazing. And then after I infuse those citrus peels in the wine for about 10 days, you know, and I'll cut them up by hand, you know, so it'll be like 100 pounds of like Seville oranges. We'll cut it up, put it into the barrels and let it soak in the wine. I take that wine and then I do other infusions with like vanilla and saffron and black pepper and a bunch of other different spices. And then at the end, I'll take little samples and I'll do these bench trials where I'll add little bits of each of these infusions into the large batch to get the flavor that I'm looking for, and then bottle it. And then I want to do a dry vermouth also, like a white dry vermouth. So they'll, you know, because the and then when I'm ready, which hopefully will be soon, Kosher for Passover gin.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. So
the vermouth is amazing. I think also people that don't know, vermouth is made from wine, which is why it's so impossible to find in the kosher world. There's no one really, there's a few, but yours is really great. And a dry is great, and a gin.
Yeah.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
Well, it's gonna, I think I want to have it out for next Pesach. So,
awesome.
So we'll keep you posted.
That's awesome. Jon, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Really,
Thanks for having me.
this was really exciting for us. I know the rabbi has to get back to his wedding also. That's why I'm like
That's
probably
No,
probably
I
one that-
am just fixated. They're calling me. The chuppah's in 4 minutes, so I'm good.
I told him to write the name of the bride and groom down on his hand, so he won't blow that one. Thank you so much. It was really special to sit with you, and we will definitely plan to take you up on your offer of heading out your way. Part 2.
That'd be great. Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
All right.